TransCanada, of course, wants to Keystone XL Pipeline. They want to run it through America, take their tar sands, which are one of the largest crude oil deposits in the world, and actually ship it outside of North America. Politicians that are in favor of it here in the U.S. say, oh, it'll help our domestic production. No, it won't. The pipeline is to go through America and out Texas to other countries. So that's just a lie. That's all it is. Okay? So now, interesting thing happened because people complain, hey, wait a minute, now you guys have a lot of accidents on this pipeline, and there's a good reason for that. And actually, the pipeline corrodes at a far greater rate than other pipelines do because of the nature of the tar sands, the chemicals that are involved there, right? Well, it turns out that they're right, and that there was a cover-up of a very significant explosion that happened in 2009. CBC News in Canada covered this. Let me give you some of the quotes here. On July 20th of 2009, the Peace River Mainline in northern Alberta exploded, sending 50-meter tall flames into the air. That's a giant explosion. Now, here's what's interesting. Few people ever learned of the rupture. Remember, it happened back in 2009. We're in 2014 now. One of the largest in the past decade, other than the Dene Tha First Nation, whose traditional territory it happened on. So the native Canadians there knew it happened because there was a giant fireball, right? But they said, no, don't worry, we're going to do a report on this. We're going to study it for a long time. We'll get back to you. I'll tell you when the investigation was closed in a second. But the Canadian government did do an investigation. They said it was inadequate field inspections and ineffective management. Yes, it was their fault that we had this giant explosion and this huge spill. In fact, let me tell you about the spill. According to the report, the pipeline spewed 1.45 million cubic meters of natural gas, equivalent to the volume of 580 Olympic-sized pools over a period of hours before TransCanada stopped the flow and put out the fire. So we had the giant explosion plus a huge oil spill. Now, one more description here from CBC. Fabian Chancalay, a local hunter, they explain, who flew over the site, described the aftermath as looking like a big ball of fire had consumed the forest, just like when they drop a bomb, he said. Now, we're told over and over again that it's perfectly safe. Now, you want to see it? Let's show you footage from CBC in their great reporting here.
Investigators are still trying to find out what caused this TransCanada pipeline explosion in southern Manitoba in late January. But CBC News has learned of another TransCanada pipeline explosion where answers were promised and effectively buried for 3 years. It happened in northern Alberta in 2009, far from urban centres and TV cameras. The explosion launched 50-meter flames, scarring the land and the Dene people who live off it. Images like this and this create concern about pipeline safety in this country. Finding out the government failed to release a frightening report may only add to the fear factor.
So now the explosion they showed you is a whole different explosion. The one that we're talking about here, they don't even have tape on, right? And partly because it was covered up. So let me tell you about that. The report, remember the explosion happened in 2009. The report gets closed on January 19th of 2011. So they do it and they close the investigation and they concluded, as I told you, that it was inadequate field inspections and ineffective management. It was TransCanada's fault. Well, now CBC explains. This report wasn't released until this January when the CBC obtained it through an access to information request. That is 3 whole years later. The NEB said the delay was caused by an administrative error when an employee left without transferring the file over. Yeah, they just, golly gee, they couldn't find that file for 3 years. Simple clerical error. Now, was there anything going on at the time they might have wanted to cover up? CBC asked for the report last October on at least 4 separate occasions. NEB refused to release the report, saying that it could be requested through access to information. Now, you got to understand that's also very important because of the timeline I'm about to tell you. But CBC is saying, hey, give us a report. Give it to us, okay? They asked 4 different times. Even if you couldn't, because of clerical error, you couldn't find it 3 years ago. Well, since October, we've asked for it 4 times. So let's find out what was going on in the meanwhile. In January 2011, TransCanada was in the midst of negotiating dozens of U.S. safety requests on pipeline construction, operation, and design on the controversial Keystone XL proposal. Not a time you don't want to explain a horrific explosion that happened in Alberta. Well, how come they kept asking for it in October at 4 different times and they wouldn't get it until just now? Quote, a crucial assessment released last week said there are no major environmental objections to the $7 billion mega project. Hey, look at that. They released a report from the United States State Department saying, don't worry, there are no environmental concerns. And then all of a sudden, oh, look, the cleric found that report back in 2011. And it says there might be giant concerns about enormous explosions and huge oil leaks. Oh, what a lucky break TransCanada got there. Look, they don't have the smoking gun on who did this clerical error and how much they got paid. But this doesn't look like the kind of corruption we have here in the US, which is systemic, where you just give somebody a campaign contribution, they do whatever you want. This looks like old school corruption, right? Like somebody got paid a lot of money to lose a file for 3 years. So I hope the CBC stays on this, because this is dirty. This is as dirty as it gets. Clerical error, my ass. Okay, they hid this, they hid it because it's a $7 billion freight train. And they're not going to lose out on $7 billion. The whole project, they estimate over a decade, will give them $2 trillion. That train is leaving that station, man. They're going to approve it here in the US, by hook or by crook, in Canada and the US. They're going to approve this thing so people can go ahead, and the overall package is $2 trillion over a long period of time. But this specific thing is going to be $7 billion in someone's pocket, and they're going to get that money. Okay? So if you think Obama's not going to approve this, you don't know what's going on here, okay? He will approve it. The Republicans are saying it's their #1 priority when they go to negotiate over raising the debt ceiling. So the only encouraging part of this story is, hey, we're not alone here in the US. Turns out Canada can be just as corrupt as we are.